Close to 60% of people who died by suicide did not disclose to anyone that they had thoughts or plans of ending their life. Despite the fact that, contrary to popular belief, most people with thoughts of suicide desperately want to live, which is why many seek help immediately after attempting to harm themselves. It's just crazy what a large number of people that are at risk of suicide are undetected and unsupported, even though they send strong warning signs that are, basically changes in their behavior. The research shows all people who attempt suicide give clues that they intend to kill themselves. But most just don't say it overtly, which is a big part of the problem. There's a lot of reasons for that, including the stigma. And in my last video, I talked about how similar I believe the process is in terms of what happens. People say, how could someone have done that? Gotten to that point to have done that and done what is perceived as being a very selfish act. And I explained that it's just like with drinking, even in the worst situations, including, say, driving with a young child, it's an out-of-body experience. And it's basically we lose the battle between the prefrontal cortex, which controls our rational thinking, in the midbrain, which is all our emotional thinking. So the way to overcome things like suicidal thoughts is by talking about it, which sounds so simple, but also can be so difficult. And I didn't really believe in the power of that till I joined a sober community, 2.5 years ago. And now I fully understand it, because it's all about strengthening that prefrontal cortex so it can win the battle against the midbrain. And I've learned a term for that, which is called limbic friction. That's when those two parts of the brain, those two systems, are out of balance. The limbic friction plays a significant role in mental health, contributing to anxiety, depression, stress-related disorders by creating a disconnect between our emotional and logical brain functions. And a big solution overcoming that is CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which I want to talk about. And I don't expect people to run out and do it, although I'd love to think so. But at least I want people to hear that the pattern in this, which is about strengthening the cortex. And that also relates to what I normally talk about is staying sober. So, CBT offers strategies to reduce limbic friction by strengthening the ability to regulate emotions and challenging negative thought patterns. Those are the things that happen in the midbrain, the limbic system. So, one of the things it does is identifies cognitive distortions, which is things like catastrophizing. People with anxiety that catastrophize, thinking about the worst case scenario. Or black and white thinking, which is also dangerous, seeing situations as all good or all bad. And that those distortions often stem from an overactive limbic system. So that's why you've got to bring in the prefrontal cortex to challenge those thoughts and reframe them. Reframe is such a powerful word. It's even the name of a sober community I once belonged to. Another thing that CBD does is challenge negative thoughts, so that by bringing in rational thinking. That's what we lack when we get overridden by our midbrain. So individuals can start to engage the prefrontal cortex more effectively when they challenge negative thoughts, which reduces the influence of emotionally driven thoughts from the limbic system. Another component of CBT is mindfulness. What is mindfulness? I always used to wonder. But it's essentially the state of awareness of your present feelings, including your bodily feelings and mental. And, mindfulness helps individuals observe emotional responses without judgment. Key, which allows the prefrontal cortex to remain engaged. And over time, the practice reduces the intensity of emotional responses from the limbic system, creating a healthier balance between emotion and logic. A great example of mindfulness is meditation. I read a great thing that said, if you're in a bad spot mentally, just try to meditate. You're going to think, I'm not going to be able to do it, right? But even just say lying down and trying it sends a message to your body that, hey, we're trying something new here. What we've been doing is not working. And if you stay patient with it, it will work. For myself, I shelled out some money to learn transcendental meditation. Highly recommend it. One more component of CBT is behavioral action, encouraging engagement in meaningful activities, even when emotions like sadness or empathy are trying to take over. So I understand it's very difficult to do, but if you can do it by engaging in deliberate, goal-directed activities, the prefrontal cortex gets activated, which again helps reduce the grip of negative emotions coming from the dreaded limbic system. So it's all easier said than done, but even if you're not doing it, get the message that you've got to do hard things. You've got to put in the work to overcome these things. So in the case of suicide, as I said, the majority don't actually want to die. So if you're having suicidal thoughts but don't want to die, you've got to talk about it. You've got to at least take that step to do the work, And it is amazing how powerful just talking about our issues are. But it is. Talking about problems helps fortify that frontal cortex. By processing emotions and labeling feelings, we activate the cortex, which again is responsible for the higher level thinking and decision making. And that process shifts activity away from the limbic system, i.e. the midbrain, which is associated with emotional reactivity. The midbrain is nothing but trouble. And if you don't do CBT, even things you can do yourself, which again, I used to kind of roll my eyes at, but are so effective. Things are, breathing exercises, journaling, which I do more. It doesn't have to be on paper. You can also journal, just, sending yourself voice memos or doing things like I do in terms of videos. Exercise is huge. Cure for everything. Cold exposure, I also am learning, is the cure for everything. I can't say enough about cold shower finishes. Cold exposure has been shown to engage the prefrontal cortex and helps the body and the mind better cope with stress. By subjecting yourself to controlled discomfort, you train the brain to regulate emotional responses more effectively. Can't say enough, and I've got a video on cold shower finishes, number 3, and I'm going to do another video on that today because I'm such a believer in it. So in summary, just limbic friction, which is again that disconnect between the frontal cortex and the midbrain. It plays a significant role in mental health, contributing to anxiety, depression, and stress-related disorders. But fortunately, things like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, can offer effective strategies to reduce limbic friction by strengthening the brain's ability to regulate emotion and challenging negative thought patterns. And again, even if you don't do CBT, I just outline some everyday things you can do that'll start doing the work. And if you're not suffering from these things, you likely know someone who is. So as I mentioned at the outset, look for those signs. People are showing signs, even if they're not talking about it, just in their behavior changes. We all need to become more aware. And we also all need to help reduce the stigma behind suicide and alcoholism. All right. As always, stronger, sober. Please like, share, subscribe. Thanks.